We're nearing the end of Polar Bear Week, that wonderful yet endangered species. Now, why am I mentioning polar bears? Well, they know how to handle the cold weather. Us humans, we need a little help from HVAC systems, especially as we approach the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. Thankfully, we're here to discuss geothermal and the economics of that HVAC option. Yes, there are Inflation Reduction Act tax credits and incentives for geothermal heat pump systems, which help to reduce cost barriers and deliver an accelerated return on investment. Now, we're going to delve into the legislation and explain how to leverage tax credits that are up to 50% for the installation of geothermal systems for commercial building owners and 30% for homeowners. We're also going to look at how to maximize accelerated depreciation deductions and government rebates for nonprofit entities. Now, joining us today for his Green Builder Media debut is Joe Parsons. Joe's expertise is in renewable and sustainable technologies, including geothermal systems, water source heat pumps, and greener hydronic solutions, contributing to global decarbonization. As a longtime advocate of sustainable solutions, he has collaborated with industry experts to influence legislation at both the state and federal levels. Serving as the Senior Marketing Sustainability Manager for Climate Control Group, he leads the initiative to assess and promote data-driven innovations in sustainable heating and cooling, and provide educational resources to navigate rebates and legislative incentives, including the aforementioned Inflation Reduction Act. Now, before we get started, I want to tell you about our sponsors. The first is Climate Master. Climate Master is a leading manufacturer of renewable geothermal HVAC systems with a 50-year history of innovative engineering. As a member of the Climate Control Group, they actively collaborate with legislators and regulatory agencies as advocates for efficient geothermal solutions that support decarbonization initiatives. Now, our other sponsor is our good friend PowerShift by NV Energy. It's a program that helps residential and business customers conserve energy and save money on their power bills. PowerShift is a one-stop resource to find energy-efficient products and services. For more information, please visit nvenergy.com/PowerShift. Now, during the course of today's presentation, you could submit questions for our guest. Simply use the questions box on the right side of your screen. I'm going to review those questions and pose those to Joe during the Q&A time that we have set aside after his presentation. All right, Joe, welcome to the webinar series.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here. I have a lot to talk about this afternoon. We're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and what that means to the geothermal heat pump market, this industry. Quite a bit to talk about, so I think I'll stop sharing my video and start focusing on the presentation. I will come back and we will cover questions, as you mentioned, toward the end of the presentation. So please drop those in the chat and we'll try to get to everything. We do have a hard stop at an hour on the presentation, so anything that we do not discuss, we will respond to those questions to get those answered for you. All right, let's get started. We've been working on this presentation actually since about September of 2022, when the Inflation Reduction Act was announced in earnest. So legislation was signed, into law. I think it was August 16th of 2022. So we've had a full year of the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. The geothermal heat pumps have long been a sound financial decision with relatively short payback, especially with on commercial applications. And the efficiency of these systems has been proven over the years. But now with this recent legislation, the reason to adopt a geothermal solution is even more compelling, with incentives and rebates ranging from 30 to 50% per commercial project. So as we go through the presentation, we'll explore how geothermal solutions can help organizations achieve sustainability and decarbonization goals. We'll also share examples of real-life projects and compare first cost and payback scenarios with previous dates to see how these projects will now utilize today's incentives to reach even better results. So let's take a look at some of the political drivers around why geothermal heat pumps were included in the Inflation Reduction Act. For a long time, we've had tax incentives out there, but on the commercial side, we were capped at 10%. So, you know, over the years, we have focused on lobbying efforts in Washington, D.C. to make sure that our legislators understood the benefits of this unique technology. And this, when we met with those entities, you know, this is what we talked about. Geothermal heat pumps are a proven technology. They're proven that because they're operating in all 50 states. So from South Florida to systems installed in Alaska, this is good technology and it works. There's no area really too warm or too cold to apply geothermal heat pump technology. Widely, also, the components of these systems are domestically made. We are one of the few industries, you know, in the United States where the majority of the product, I would say 90% of the products that are installed in the United States are built here in the United States. And not just the geothermal heat pumps themselves, but the ground loops, the plastic HDPE ground loops are built here. Many of the drilling rigs that are used to install vertical diagonal ground loops are built here as well. So it's certainly an area that Congress was interested in based on job creation around these new incentives. Yeah, as a solution to convert electricity to thermal energy, heat pumps are the best way to go. And geothermal heat pumps excel on in those target areas. Air source heat pumps, for example, and even electric vehicles. I know there's a widespread move to incorporating electric vehicles, but these tend to stress the grid at peak demand. While geothermal heat pumps, they provide maximum demand reduction when running at 100%. So, yeah, there's been a great rush, as I said, to focus on heat pump technology, but in reality, the way to get to, you know, a net zero carbon economy is by the installation of these ground source heat pumps. We also have a long history of, you know, satisfied customers. So geothermal heat pumps also offer a very unique position from a standpoint of clean energy, you know, and they've achieved this unique position also in public policy. So that's really taking a look at, you know, some of the reasons that geothermal heat pumps were included in the Inflation Reduction Act. So let's turn our attention to commercial tax incentives. So what's covered there? As I mentioned before, the tax incentives we had prior to the IRA were at 10%. So we've been increased, you know, from 10% to other options. But if you take a look at the structure of the tax credits, really we're starting at a base rate of 6% with a bonus rate of five times the base rate. And to achieve that, there are a couple of parameters that have to be met. So if your installation is less than 1 megawatt of required thermal energy or electrical or thermal energy, your project automatically gets that additional bonus. So you're going from 6% to 30%. And this covers a lot of light commercial projects. It doesn't, you know, include a lot of the new installations, high-rise buildings, and, you know, systems that are basically, you know, out there that are exceed that rate. But what it does for us, the IRA also provides a way of meeting that additional bonus requirement. So to do that, if you're over 1 megawatt, you must meet prevailing wage rates, and on most larger projects, you know, projects that would be more than, you know, 284 tons in that range, you might already be, you know, working under prevailing wage rates. And there's also a qualified apprenticeship program that those requirements need to be met to get to that bonus situation. One other constraint: any project that started prior to January 29th of 2023 has automatically been grandfathered in to receive that bonus status. So just covering, here are the basic parameters, how to get from basically from 6% to 30%. But that's not the entirety of what is out there and available. So there are ways to go from 30% up to 40% and even to 50% if you meet certain additional parameters. Again, looking at the way that the credits are laid out, you have basically a 6% base rate and then base rates of 2% on domestic content and energy communities. Again, those can hit the 5 times bonus and under certain scenarios, and we'll walk through that process as we walk through the presentation. So how do we get from 30 to 50%? First, we'll talk about domestic content. So to achieve domestic content, the construction projects the components of that project must be produced with iron and steel. And these are building projects. So if if you have a structural building that's a part of this program and you're going to go after tax incentives for incorporating these energy efficient measures, any of the structural components would need to be made of steel that's produced here in the U.S. Manufactured products, again, must be produced in the U.S., but there's some constraints and still some concerns around the clarity that we've received from the Treasury Department right now. Right now, the computation that's required to determine the amount of components that are made in the U.S. is extremely complicated and difficult. So we have reached out through the GeoExchange organization to have communications with the IRS, and we're seeking clarification that we're expecting in the fourth quarter of yet this year. So let's take a look at the responsibility for determining domestic content. Again, that really is relying on the individual, the owner of the project, that is receiving these incentives. So that needs to be taken into consideration when making that decision. Furthermore, we have what are known as energy communities. An energy community bonus, there are basically 3 ways to qualify. First, there are brownfield sites. These are sites that typically were involved in industrial manufacturing where there's been sort of pollution on the site. So any area that would meet that brownfield requirement, and this can be determined by basically reaching out to the Environmental Protection Agency that serves that particular market. They can not only provide you information to know which sites, which zip codes, or even which city blocks are included in these areas, but also what's out there and available as incentives for brownfield site remediation. So typically, when you're using a brownfield site, you would be responsible for that cleanup, but there are incentives out there to make that happen. So in addition to brownfield sites, we also have what are known as statistical areas. And these are areas that meet certain requirements. So, and this falls under the energy community portion as well. So these are census tracts where we have areas that have been disadvantaged by basically the closing of fossil fuel related industries. So coal closures, for example. Any census tract or adjoining census tract that has a coal mine that's closed since the year 2000, or a census tract or adjoining tract for a coal plant that's closed since 2010, that would be qualified as one of these statistical areas. And it also needs to take into consideration the level of unemployment within that particular area. That would need to be based on a legislative determination, an area with 0.17 employment, total employment related to the production of coal, oil, and natural gas, and with a higher than average unemployment rate, or an area where 25% of the overall tax revenue had been related to the production of coal, oil, natural gas, and also qualifying with that higher than average unemployment rate. So we'll touch on that a bit more as we go through, but brownfield sites, the question always comes up is, how do we determine what is a brownfield site? So we've been able to put together information we pull from maps, and these provide you an overview of these areas. And you can see there's a higher concentration in the Northeast and some of the industrial areas in the Great Lakes region, and also areas where you had substantial amount of oil and gas production. So the question, as I said, always comes up is how do we really know? We've been able to locate what's known as the Enviro Atlas, and it's an environmental, demographic area map that can be used to identify these areas. It makes it very simple. You can basically insert a zip code, and it will, create a curated, set of map layers to show you where these brownfield sites are. But as I said earlier, it's always best to contact your local EPA office for assistance regarding these brownfield sites to determine exactly where they are in your area, and if there are other funds out there available to help remediate those sites. So let's take a look now at areas related to fossil fuel employment. This map indicates these coal mines that we were talking about, and all the numbers on the slide are a little bit different. Anything after 1999 for that coal mine closing, or a power plant that was fueled by fossil fuels closing after the year 2009. These are listed, and if you see on the map, you can see that those areas in the darker orange are where the census tracts where those mines or power plants are actually located. Did you also see adjoining those? These are the adjoining census tracts that we discussed. And the government included this because typically, we're trying to address issues where closures have created a hardship on those within those areas. So typically the employees, for these plants or mines would come from areas that are adjacent. So they would also qualify. Now, looking at the statistical areas, these are known as MSAs, which are metropolitan statistical areas, and then non-MSAs. And you can see here the areas initially, this slide. You can see these areas, again, where the areas in blue, these areas had employment that was, again, within that percentage related to the industries of coal, oil, and natural gas. The areas in the purple color are areas that have also met the unemployment rates. These rates are established every year. They typically come out in the month of March and are typically published in the month of April. So initially looking at this, before the unemployment rates were published, we really didn't get a great picture of what was included because all we could see on this map were the blue areas. Once the the information around unemployment was released, then we are able to do the overlay of this area. So by doing that, we can take a look now at really everything that's qualifying in this energy community bonus credit. So you have everything overlaid. You have your census tracts around coal closures, power plant closures, and then you have also those areas that are included, in those areas where there was substantial employment around fossil fuel production. So you can see there's a substantial amount of these areas that are covered, and then we can lay in the brownfield areas as well. So one of the things that's really had a great deal of impact and something that was really we've never seen before from a standpoint of tax credits or incentives. Before, in order to receive a tax credit, you obviously had to have a tax liability. With the adoption of the Inflation Reduction Act, this has opened up these same opportunities to nonprofit organizations. So, in areas where, and this, again, you have no tax liability, and typically these organizations have not even filed tax credits or tax returns. Now there's a possibility of receiving basically a refund check. So this direct pay option is available for certain tax exempt organizations like state and local governments, or Tennessee Valley Authority as far as a power producer, Indian tribal governments, Alaskan Native corporations, even rural electric co-ops qualify for this. So if you have a situation like a nonprofit organization, from a municipality with a school district, for example, you can install ground source heat pumps and receive not only the overall benefit of the efficiency of operating costs and maintenance, but you can also receive an incentive check basically once that project is complete. So to qualify for this, it had to begin projects that were started in 2023. There's also a maximum credit for the rebate, but it's not limited, and it can be carried back for a period of 3 years or carried forward. There's also, in addition to a direct pay option, there's also the ability to transfer any applicable credits to another taxpayer. So basically, you could sell those credits to another entity that had a substantial tax liability. So it's providing a ways for project owners to monetize their projects, by selling the credits or transferring them to third parties. There's still substantial questions around what's this transferability and elective pay. I've included a link though here in the presentation, which will be available after the presentation. This provides a lot of information. I think there are probably 40. This is a frequently asked questions document with at least 40 different questions that address the majority of questions that have come up over, since beginning in March of 2023, around this new IRS section, Section 6417. This will walk you through the process of how you qualify, for these additional incentives. There are some requirements, a requirement for a pre-registration of your project. This document will walk you through which forms to use for that, how to get that done. It's not really a pre-qualification. It's only a pre-registration because, again, we're dealing with entities that had no tax liability before and it typically never filed a tax return. This allows them to register their project, and it must be done within the year that project is going to be complete. So, everything hinges on when that project is completed and submitted for the tax return and would be paid within that tax year. There's also something that we've had, throughout the incentive incentives that we had before on the commercial tax credits with, like the 10% credit before. We've always had the ability over the past at least 10 years to take an accelerated depreciation. So what does that mean? That means that typically the basis of the standard HVAC systems, typical rooftop units, boiler chiller applications, they're depreciable, but they're only depreciable on what's known as a 39-year straight line depreciation basis. So by depreciating over 39 years, this would provide only about 3.3% of the basis in tax savings over the first 5 years. By qualifying as an energy property, the owner is able to depreciate that investment over the first 5 years. So as I said, 39-year straight line depreciation. In the first 5 years, you'd only be getting a little over 3% of the tax savings. You can take the entire depreciation in the first 5 years. Also, there are accelerated depreciation schedules, bonus depreciation, which allow, based on the tax year, the current tax year, you could elect to depreciate your investment in the first year, if that's what you choose to do. So systems that were installed in 2022, that bonus allowance was 100%. So you could expense 100% of that investment in the first year. Depreciation schedules typically decline over time, and as they get close to zero, they're basically started over again. So projects that complete in 2023 are going to qualify at 80% bonus depreciation, 60% in 2024, and then potentially phase out in 2027. But again, historically, these do not phase out. This is not just something that's out there for ground source heat pumps. It disqualifies other properties as well. So historically, it will renew itself and start over at 100%. So let's take a look now. We talked a little bit about the structure of the tax credits, what they look like, how they're made up, and some of the areas that are where we still need to have some clarity from Treasury over how to request these tax credits. But we felt like it was very important to provide a tool that would help contractors, it would help architects and engineers, specifying engineers, building owners, and those who are out there selling, ground source heat pumps into this market, create a tool that allows them to factor in the overall benefits of the real economics related to the adoption of IRA. So let's take a look first at what would be how we could impact a non-taxable entity. So before the IRA, there were some local incentives around nonprofit organizations that would install ground source heat pumps, but that was really up until IRA. A charitable organization, for example, just didn't qualify. So what we've done is put together a tool that provides us, anyone who downloads this tool can quickly determine the impact. So what we wanted to do, ultimately, is having everyone who needs this information, providing them access to this tool. But we thought it was very important to show the overall benefit of what we had before and what we have now. So in order to do this, and when we provide training on how to use this tool, we take a look at a couple of examples. These are projects that were installed actually here in Oklahoma City. One was a charitable organization, and one was not. One was a for-profit. So we'll take a look at both of those. Again, this tool is available for download from the CCG and ClimateMaster website. So let's take a look at, this is Catholic Charities Organization, Oklahoma City. Again, we can see that obviously there's no real incentives here. So what we do when we use this tool, we look at an installation comparison. So we look at a traditional HVAC system, and since this project had already specified HVAC equipment, we knew exactly what the cost of that equipment would be. So to determine this, basically it's a calculation of determining the project cost per square foot. System designers, system specifiers typically know this area, this information in a particular region. So it allows you to customize this. It's not one size fits all. It's, if you're in Chicago versus Oklahoma City, the cost of product, the cost of installation will vary based on the contributing factors there. So in this project, traditional HVAC came in at $508,000 for this two-story new construction building. The geothermal system, again, this was from the actual quote. This is the number that was provided and paid, $737,000. Again, there was no IRA tax rebate at the time. There was a 10% tax incentive at the time, but you only got that if you qualified and had tax liability. So in this calculation, you're looking at the cost per square foot, and you're looking at basically the overall savings per square foot, which is a calculation of operating cost savings and maintenance cost savings for this type of structure. Yeah, so in the first year, the investment of this organization, almost $195,000. In year 5, they're approaching $8,000. So this system basically paid for itself at about 6.5 years. By 10 years, based on the energy savings and the reduced maintenance cost, they had accumulated a little over around $207,000 in savings, based on operating cost savings. So what would have happened today if there's another building, and there are out there, there's a lot of interest, especially with this tool to be able to project what the savings will be. So let's take a look at the same structure. By taking a look at this under today's tax benefits. So again, the same numbers out there. Traditional HVAC, $508,000. Geothermal, $737,000, excuse me. In this scenario, under the IRA, the owners of this charitable organization, in the year that it was completed, would have received a check from the IRS for $338,000. Again, you've got the same savings per square foot, again, operating costs and reduced maintenance. What this means is, in the first year, this owner would be cash positive, $143,000 cash positive in the first year, and accumulated savings, of almost $550,000 in the first 10 years of operation. You'll notice too, and I apologize for the size of this spreadsheet. We tried to get everything on one slide here, but you'll notice there, why was there no depreciation? Well, in order to depreciate an asset, you have to have that tax liability. So remember that as we look forward, because those numbers radically change the payback. So again, this takes a look, and this could be, this could be a tribal organization. It could be a K through 12 school. It could be, again, any sort of nonprofit organization. So it helps to be able to show this and talk about it in an intelligent way to help a customer make that decision to go geothermal. So let's take a look now at a for-profit project. This project was completed in 2016. It was actually sold in a construction team meeting with the CEO of this organization, and by an entity that was actually using something similar to this geoeconomics tool. Again, while it was in kind of the conceptual design stage. The geothermal has always, as I said earlier in the beginning, always made sense, but even now the paybacks are just tremendous, a really compelling argument to go this way. So again, this project is a 6-story, purpose-built Class A office building, basically. You'll notice on the slide there were some additional items included in this project. These are dry coolers that were designed to not to provide any sort of benefit to the heating or cooling load of the structure. These are designed to maintain the ground temperature around the earth loops. They're somewhat limited because all the ground loops are installed vertically and are beneath the parking area. So rather than expanding that loop field, these dry coolers were installed, and these only operate when the ambient temperature is below 48 degrees. So, the installation of these components has zero effect on the summer peak, and that's important because, if you're looking for auxiliary equipment to provide some of the basic load, then that has to be taken into consideration around the overall amount of ground source geothermal system that have been installed to meet that interior demand, overall annual demand for heating and cooling. So in this case, again, dry coolers were installed. They were a benefit. They're not a contributor to the thermal transfer of heat within the building, so they would have qualified as part of the overall project cost. So let's take a look here. And this is a kind of a unique scenario because the utility, Oklahoma Gas and Electric, had a substantial rebate in place at the time that this project qualified for. But again, let's take a look at equipment costs. So the traditional HVAC equipment, again, this is based on actual. The equipment had already been specified and costed out for this project. This is based on bid documents. So again, a project like this, rather expensive equipment, a little over $3 million for traditional. The geothermal systems came in higher, but around $3.5 million. Not a great deal of difference there. The inflation, let's say IRA tax credit, this is not IRA credit. This was the credit that was in place at the 10% level prior to IRA. So pardon the mistake there, but $366,793 based on a 10% tax credit. Again, this building is calculating $1 per square foot, energy, operating cost savings and reduced maintenance savings. In this scenario, again, this based on the incentives from the utility was cash positive in year one. Okay, that's not typical. Again, that rebate was substantial. We'll take a look at that check as we go forward. But again, the geothermal system was cash positive in year one. Kind of a no-brainer there. Year 5, $1.7 million, and a 10-year projection of a little over $2 million. Year 5 was certainly a reality. Sorry about that. Again, the year 5 calculation certainly met that projection, slightly exceeded that projection, and there's the expectation in 10 years. So now let's take a look in today's business climate. So if this system were installed and completed in 2023, then you'll notice the areas within the spreadsheet here, those in blue are required inputs. Okay, so you got your energy credit here of 30%. We're assuming, again, a 10% bonus credit for domestic content. And energy community credit, this project is not in an area that would have qualified, so that would not be included. So we're looking at an overall tax benefit of a 40% credit here. You'll also notice there are other areas like corporate and federal taxes. These are all baked into this system. So depending on where you are, what state you're in, what local area you are in, based on the implementation of a, zip code, it will provide you with information around exactly what to expect. And these tax rates are updated, on an annual basis. So this calculator is always fresh and also always provides the most accurate information possible. So in this scenario, we're looking at the same equipment. We're looking rather than a tax credit before, which we were looking before at an income tax credit at 10% at $366,000. We're looking at an IRA tax credit of almost $1.5 million for this particular project. So what does that mean to the bottom line? Well, in this scenario, the owner, we're looking at a scenario where they chose to go with accelerated depreciation. So depreciating the entire investment at 80%, less the tax credit. So you're going to remove the tax credits from that. And then at 80%, you're looking at, being cash positive in the first year, at $1,883,000, almost $884,000 in the first year. Year 5, 2.3 million, and year 10, you're looking at almost $2.7 million. So here's the check, basically. As I mentioned before, this was kind of a unique situation where Gulfport Energy, the owner of this building, received a rebate check from Oklahoma Gas and Electric for $237,000, which was actually the largest incentive check that they had ever written for this type of program. Those incentives are not in place at the time, so we have the other incentives out there through IRA to help through that. So what is this tool? This tool is important. We feel like that to tell the story of the benefits of tax credits, it just makes good operating sense to understand how to use the tool. Okay, so we make it available. We make it available, at no cost through download from our website, and our sales team is certainly willing and able to provide you with additional information to walk you through a project, to also show the opportunity to incorporate the additional tax credits, and provide that knowledge around guidance as to how to capture those additional credits, especially as we receive additional information from the Treasury Department. So I mentioned this tool was created initially before we had 30 to 50% additional incentives on commercial projects. But this is just a kind of a tabular view of how this tool was used when we had 10% tax credits. So a particular contractor here in the Oklahoma City area, totally involved not only in commercial but residential geothermal projects, use this tool to get in front of the building owner, to get in front of the developer, to say, okay, you understand what it's going to cost to install a conventional system. Please consider geothermal. Those of you have, obviously there's been some challenges around selling geothermal because of the perceived cost of installation and not really looking ahead at the, how properly designed systems can pay for themselves, easily in 5 to 6 years, and the overall benefits to a system that has extreme longevity and provides, continuing operating cost savings and maintenance cost savings But here's a view of exactly what's out there. And then these projects are verified. A total, over a 5-year period of 102 projects that were sold. 3.9 million square feet in total, and these are projects that are ranging from strip mall type applications to standalone mom and pop stores to warehouse areas, and office areas. So a wide variety of here, and all these qualified for simply a 10% tax credit. But once that was presented to them in a way by using this tool, it made sense, and resulted in those sales. So that ends my presentation. Certainly willing, hopefully have some questions available that I can provide some guidance on, some answers to, and I'll turn it back to the team.
All right, thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it much. And if you do have questions, like you said, go ahead and submit those via the questions box. We'll try to get to as many as we can here in the next 10 minutes. We have one from Sarah in regards to power purchase agreements, or PPAs. We see those in the solar industry. Do they offer those in the geothermal sector? And if not, what are the hurdles that are preventing that from happening?
That's certainly something that's under discussion now, to take advantage of those opportunities, especially from the standpoint of looking at purely from a decarbonization standpoint, understanding what incentives are out there, and how to create some meaningful use from those incentives. So again, not a substantial amount of information that I can provide on that subject at the moment, but it's something that we're certainly keep our ear to the ground on. And, a lot of what we do is focused on continuing lobbying efforts for, these technologies. So, that's something that's certainly a hot topic, as well as third-party ownership, things like that. So, which solar has had for a while, and it seems to be a way that this industry could really advance itself more rapidly to deploy, ground source heat pumps, really in all areas.
Right. Okay. And then also a question in regards to some of the labor challenges that we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing them in the building industry, certainly. I don't think geothermal industry has been spared from some of the labor challenges. So in your opinion, is there anything that can be done to address that?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been working, with various state organizations over the past year and a half now to work through these workforce development challenges. Doing quite a bit in the state of New York and other areas where geothermal heat pumps have been adopted, for several years. It's, we're working in areas like Chicago where the labor unions have been involved, in providing drilling services. Also doing a great deal of outreach to the drilling industry, because we really can't get there, without the alignment with drillers. So going through the process of providing education of changing from water well drilling to geothermal drilling and creating, scenarios around the business opportunities. And now we're seeing a great deal of, excitement from some companies that have kind of seen the handwriting on the wall that this is a market, that's a huge growing market. We need that infrastructure, that drilling infrastructure, and we also need that HVAC input as well. This industry itself has been aging out, basically. I mean, really, we've had people that are experts in the industry, and you've got companies that started out as mom and pop organizations. There are a few out there now, and I say a few, there are, a substantial percentage of companies that see the opportunity to, take advantage of the decarbonization requirements, and I think that's what it really comes down to. The tax credits are great. I mean, but we don't need that dependency on tax credits. That's been one thing that's going to hinder this industry over time, is that overall focus on what the tax credit's going to be, and we're and have companies involved based on when that tax credit is set to expire. So IRA has done a great things for us, because it extended that runway from typically being 2 to 3 years for an extender to 10 years at full boat, and an additional 2 years before things wind down. So I think we're seeing a great deal of interest now in investing in the technology that's really going to be necessary to get us over the finish line and hit those 2030 and 2050 decarbonization goals.
You brought up drilling, you brought up the oil and gas industry. There was a question that came in asking if the industry's ever looked at intangible drilling costs from the oil and gas industry for their vertical well bores.
There are some studies out there. We do quite a bit of outreach with companies and individuals who have come from the oil and gas industry, and I've seen some studies too around making use of those, basically some of the abandoned wells that are out there. So you've got the hard work has been done, repurposing those wells for ground source applications. I think is something that we need to be looking at all the options out there.
Yeah. Switching to a different question here from Sudeep, who wanted to know what incentives are available for schools in California?
There are, again, if these are nonprofit organizations, they would qualify for the same, these basically this electric pay scenario. I'm not sure if that answers the question completely, but California, there's a great deal of potential, in that state. We're seeing a lot of increase in school projects. We're seeing a lot in, healthcare as well. Adopting systems that are geothermal heat pump based, ground source chiller, reverse cycle chiller based projects like that, where in campus installations as well. I mean, you hear about major geothermal projects like the George Lucas project, but there are a lot of other projects, in correctional facilities that have been going in with geothermal systems for quite some time now. We're also seeing a great deal of interest now in, I guess you'd qualify these as district systems or community systems, shared thermal energy. A lot of communities that are considering that. With the National Decarb Conference 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that was kind of a source of discussion with several people that I met with there, is what can we do as municipalities that are either increasing or upgrading their infrastructure, for example. Why not include a thermal connection within the city right away that would provide heat that could be transferred from building to building, basically, because you have systems that are providing discharging heat into the loop, and you have systems at the same time that are extracting heat from that loop. So that makes a lot of sense. I think there are a lot of exciting areas. We're seeing that in New England. We're seeing certain projects that are underway right now in Massachusetts that are doing that, and we're seeing overall communities. We have a community in Kentucky that's gone entirely geothermal for the last 6 years. There are thousands of systems, and probably anywhere from 3 to 4 loop systems going in every week, just growing that. And based on the success story there, there's interest in investment to create another additional 2 communities that are doing the same thing. So it's just it's taking that what was a leap of faith a few years ago, and now with these incentives, there's substantially less risk out there, in the first few years to be able to see that payback. And there's a lot more expertise out there. Well, you're looking at people getting involved not only on the drilling side and not only on the HVAC side, but the key important part of this is the system designers out there, and educating the architects and engineers and specifying engineers, and the companies that are involved, the mechanical contractors, so that they're ramped up and ready to take advantage of this opportunity. So it's a huge education process, and that's one area of focus here that's really important to the sustainability side of this industry. Making systems available out there to making them simplification, I guess is a good way to put it. So that facilities managers in commercial buildings can easily understand what they're dealing with. We have to demystify geothermal. It's perceived as being this complicated process, but while there are a lot of moving parts, it doesn't have to be. It's not a magical technology. It's understandable, and we're seeing so many installations out there that are taking advantage of it. So, long road ahead of us, and as far as workforce development, you're absolutely right. A substantial amount of work still needs to be done there.
And you mentioned the success story there in Kentucky. Just to give our audience a sense of the size of the success, how large approximately is that community that you were referring to?
I think right now we're approaching almost 7,000 systems that have gone in this community. It's a large development that's gone through multiple phases. It was interesting because when it started out, they were going with the conventional system with gas furnaces and standard air conditioners. A lot of zero lot line houses in this development. It's kind of a live work type community where you can walk from your home to the store and to the theater and things like that. So you had this scenario where you had basically a 10-foot separation between these homes, and it was substantially difficult to walk between around one condensing unit around the other, and it was creating this noise corridor between these the two residences. So the developer happened to be at a convention, and actually it was one of the client master salesmen presenting there around geothermal, and this was 10 years ago. And the owner really got involved, wanted to learn more, came to Oklahoma City, spent some time with us here, and made the decision to make that conversion. So that was kind of the beginning of that. So it's a design community. Our representative in the area helps with the overall system design. Everything is very well defined, so they know exactly how much ground loop to install for each system. That goes in well in advance of the structure actually going up. So it's like staying ahead of the production rate. So substantial amount of impact there. And we're seeing that in other areas of the country as well. Not just with Climate Master products, but with other brands as well, taking advantage of developing these communities around. I keep saying district systems, and they're almost district systems, but they become hybrid systems. A lot of college campuses, for example, are adopting, again, moving heat from one building to the next, installing ground source heat pumps, tapping into the overall heat energy that's produced there, thermal energy that's produced there, and not just relying on ground source for the application, looking at applications with high efficiency boilers and cooling towers and chillers, things like that. That is important. We're moving toward an area where we have less dependency on fossil fuels. But if there are fossil fuel appliances that are efficient out there in place, it makes sense to take advantage of those to get the overall best performance of the system.
And final question here, Joe. I talked about in the open about benefits, incentives, tax credits to homeowners. I think up to 30%. Can you talk a little bit more? Because Kim was asking about this. You talk a little bit more about the residential credits and incentives as it pertains to like a single family home?
No, absolutely, absolutely. What IRA did, we were in a scenario where we were going into the second year of kind of the decline. We had been at 30%. We dropped down to 26%. We're going into the second year at 26%, and then those credits were scheduled to sunset at 22%. What IRA did, it basically changed everything from a 26% level to a 30% level, and gave us an additional 10 years at 30%. Those credits are out there and available. The guidelines are quite similar to what we had in the past, almost identical to what we had in the past. It's just that the rate has changed. One thing though that has changed with IRA, there's also funding out there for weatherization projects. So it makes sense to tighten the building envelope before you do the calculation to determine how much geothermal heat pump capacity that you actually need. So if there's funding out there available, and this is, I think it's a total of $9.5 million, I think with almost 4.5 of that earmarked for low to moderate income families. But to take that information, take those dollars are being distributed to the states. There's some states that are not capitalizing on that now. There are others that already have programs in place. I think that I was doing some research before the webinar, and I think we're up to almost 30 states that have programs that are planned or already in place to provide funding to, again, weatherize the home and to take advantage of that. And some of these funds can be, it's not like you're having to do everything in the first year. Some of these can be, they're tax credits that are out there and available that can be taken in multiple years as well. So I think it's called the HERA program, which is, Home Energy, HERA program. Look for that to see if your state has, that program in place to take advantage of those opportunities. You could spend, $3,000 on weatherization and potentially reduce the amount of ground source heat pump that you would need by, a half ton to a ton of capacity, which would, again, reduce the size of the system, reduce the cost of the system, and more importantly, reduce the amount of drilling or excavation that would be required to support that ground source heat pump.
And just real quick, Joe, those guidelines you mentioned, where do we find those at? Is that something that your organization has to be able to distribute, or is there somewhere governmentally that we can go?
We provide, documentation on the website for both residential and commercial. We keep, the commercial, as I said, it's kind of a moving target as far as guidance from Treasury. So we keep that document as fresh as possible when anything comes out, and the same on the residential side. So again, these programs, as they roll out, as far as those incentives, we're monitoring that, and we'll keep the website updated, kind of put together a listing now of which states are adopting and which aren't. I think it's important to, provide that information. We also, we have, personnel who are expert in their area, with regional managers who understand the incentives that are out there available, in the area they cover. We're also adding to the website to, a program that we're working with Eco Rebates. So if you happen to be looking for a particular type of product on our website, be it residential, be it commercial, click on that particular product, that overall model, or even an individual product, and it will pull up any incentives that are out there and available, be it federal incentives or local incentives. So in some states, again, like in New York, for example, there, you might, click on a packaged residential heat pump, and you have federal incentives. You would have incentives for state income tax, reduction there or credits, and but it will calculate. It's basically a database that's based on the HRI Energy Star performance number of that system, and it will calculate those rebates and provide you a direct link to those rebates. So just a service we feel like it's important to get the word out from an incentive standpoint. It's something that we have out there and available. But please, go to the Climate Master, to the Climate Control Group website. All that information is out there and up front. I mentioned, it's a free download, not only for the calculator for commercial, but all that other information that's out there as far as, that tax brochure. It's amazing to see a counter basically on my computer for the number of downloads of that tool. And I checked just before the presentation today, since October the 1st, we've had like 368 downloads of that calculator tool from individuals and companies around the United States who are interested in learning more about how to use the tool, and we feel like it's important for us to provide that information out there to our customers.
All right, and then I just put it into the link of the chat, climatemaster.com. Check it out. I don't see any other questions, so I want to thank Joe for sharing his time with us today. Really appreciate it, Joe. And thank you also to our audience for attending and asking the questions that you did. We really do appreciate your interactivity with us. Thank you also to Climate Master. Check them out at climatemaster.com, and also PowerShift by NV Energy for their generous sponsorships. Now, we'll see you back here again in 1 month for another webinar. And it's not just any webinar. Oh, no. It's the annual State of the Industry webinar from the Sustainability Commander-in-Chief, Sarah Gutterman. Won't you join us on Wednesday, December 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next time, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you're able to relax and enjoy some great food with family and friends and all the things that make it the best holiday, at least in my opinion anyway. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.
Thanks. Bye.